I used to believe that love was the one thing that could withstand the trials of life. I believed it even when I lost the ability to move below my neck after a terrible accident. I believed it even when I became nothing more than an observer, in my own home, unable to lift a hand in protest, unable to chase away the growing shadows in my mind. But belief is a fragile thing. It shattered the night I heard them. My wife, Sarah, the woman I had built a life with, was laughing in our bedroom. But it wasn't her usual laughter. It was softer, breathier, tinged with something that sent ice down my spine. And then there was his voice. Franklin Carter, our neighbor, a man I had despised even before I ended up in this prison of a body. Carter was loud, obnoxious, the kind of man who thought the world owed him something. He smelled of stale beer and cheap cologne. He had an ego bigger than his bank account, and yet my wife, my Sarah, had let him in. I wanted to scream, to move, to do something, but all I could do was listen. I spent weeks trapped in a silent hell, helplessly witnessing stolen glances, whispers, the rustle of sheets at odd hours of the night. My once warm and devoted wife had turned into a stranger before my very eyes. She still cared for me, of course, bathed me, fed me, pretended as if everything was normal. But I knew everything. And then the night came. They were careless. Or maybe they thought I had truly become nothing but furniture, incapable of thinking, of feeling. Sarah stood in the kitchen, whispering urgently. He suspects something. Carter chuckled. So what? He can't do anything. He's a corpse with open eyes. Sarah hesitated. I don't know. I feel guilty. You feel guilty now? He scoffed. You didn't feel guilty when... Bang! The gunshot shattered the air and Carter collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest. Blood spilled out in a thick crimson river. Sarah stood there, wide-eyed, the smoking gun trembling in her grip. And then she turned toward me. A smile curled on her lips. You saw everything, didn't you, darling? I tried to scream. She walked over slowly, crouching beside my wheelchair. Franklin was right about one thing. You can't do anything. She wiped the gun clean and placed it in my limp hand. My fingerprints were already on the barrel. She had held my fingers around it many times before while cleaning it for me. Then, she picked up the phone. Her voice trembled with the perfect amount of fear. 911? Please. My husband. He shot him! I don't know what happened. He just pulled the trigger. The world blurred around me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't run. I could do nothing as the sirens wailed in the distance. But as the flashing lights painted the walls, red and blue, a strange calm settled over me because Sarah had made one mistake. She thought I was helpless. She thought I had no way to fight back. But she had forgotten that I still had one thing left, a secret that I had been keeping from her for weeks, could move my fingers. And tonight, she would learn just how dangerous a man can be when he has nothing left to lose. The sirens howled, growing louder with each passing second. Sarah stood by the doorway, trembling, the perfect grieving wife. I don't know what happened, she sobbed into the phone. He was always so angry after the accident, and then now, oh God, please hurry. I sat there, silent, motionless. A corpse with open eyes, just like Carter had called me. Except I wasn't dead. And soon, neither would Sarah's secrets be. 1 hour earlier, I had spent weeks trapped in my own mind, watching Sarah betray me, waiting for the right moment. And in that time, something had changed. At first, it was a flicker, a twitch in my index finger. Then a slight movement in my wrist. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't tell anyone, because I was waiting. Tonight, when she placed the gun in my lap, when she curled my fingers around the barrel to frame me, she had made a fatal mistake. She didn't notice that my fingers had closed, on the grip by themselves. Present moment, The front door burst open and officers stormed in, 2 uniforms, 1 detective. Sarah ran to them, her face a masterpiece of controlled panic. He shot Franklin. I don't know why. He just snapped. The detective, a sharp-eyed man with graying hair, turned to me. His gaze was unreadable. "Mr. Langston, can you tell me what happened?" Sarah spoke before I could even try. "He can't speak. He can't move. But he did this. I saw it with my own eyes." The officers exchanged glances. The detective sighed, rubbing his jaw. "Funny thing about that," he muttered. Sarah frowned. "What?" The detective crouched in front of me. His eyes searched mine, as if he could hear the screams locked inside my skull. "We got an anonymous tip. Tonight," he said. "Someone sent a message from your husband's email. Attached was security footage. From this house." Sarah's breath hitched. "What?" The detective stood, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen, then turned it toward her. On it was grainy security footage, clear enough to see her and Carter whispering in the kitchen. Carter laughing, Sarah hesitating, and then her pulling the trigger. Sarah staggered backward. No, that's not real. He's setting me up." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Your paralyzed husband?" The officers stepped forward. One pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Sarah Langston, you're under arrest for the murder of Franklin Carter." Sarah shrieked, her mask shattering. "No, this isn't possible. He can't even move." And that's when I did it. It was small, just the faintest twitch of my hand, the briefest flex of my fingers. But Sarah saw it. Her eyes widened in pure horror. I let a slow smile creep across my lips. Sarah's scream was the last thing I heard as they dragged her away, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. Sarah was gone. Arrested. Screaming. But I knew my fight wasn't over, because people like Sarah, they don't go down quietly. 1 week later, I sat in my wheelchair watching the rain streak down the window of my rehabilitation center. It was a private facility, expensive, discreet, funded by an old business partner who still believed in me even after the accident. Thanks to the recordings I had secretly sent to the detective, Sarah was in jail, awaiting trial. I was free, and I was getting stronger. The doctors had been stunned when I showed them my progress. Small movements at first, fingers, wrists, then my arms. They said I might never walk again. I wasn't so sure, because I had something stronger than medicine. I had revenge. 2 weeks later, my first visitor was Detective Reeves, the man who had arrested Sarah. "She's trying to cut a deal," he said, pulling up a chair. "Claims she was forced into the affair, that Carter was abusive, that she shot him in self-defense." I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Do you believe her?" Reeves smirked. "Not for a second, but her lawyers are good. She's playing the victim card. If she convinces a jury," he sighed, "she could walk away free." That wasn't going to happen. I clenched my fingers. Slow, steady. I was getting stronger. "Detective," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "I want to testify." 1 month later. The trial. The courtroom was packed. The press was everywhere. My name had become a headline. "Husband set up for murder by wife. Wheelchair-bound man speaks out." I sat at the witness stand, my hands gripping the armrests. Sarah sat across from me in her orange jumpsuit, her hair neatly tied back, her face carefully composed. But her eyes burned with hatred. She still thought she could win. Her lawyer stood. "Mr. Langston," he said, "you've suffered immense trauma, haven't you?" I nodded. "Yes. And in that trauma, isn't it possible that you misinterpreted events? That you saw what you wanted to see?" I let a small smile curl my lips. "You mean, did I imagine my wife sneaking around with Carter?" Did I imagine her putting the gun in my hand? I leaned forward. Or are you asking if I imagined her pulling the trigger? Silence. Then I spoke again, louder, stronger. There's one thing you should know about being paralyzed. You learn to listen. You hear every whisper, every lie, every betrayal. I turned to the jury. She thought I was nothing more than a body in a chair, but I knew everything, and I made sure the world knew too. Sarah shot up from her chair. You lying son of a... Order! The judge slammed the gavel. The jury saw it. Her true face. She had lost 3 hours later. The verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. Sarah let out a strangled scream as the guards grabbed her. She turned toward me, her face twisted with rage. You think you've won! You think... This is over! I'll get out! I'll find you! I smiled. I'll be waiting. And then they took her away. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of a quiet park. No wheelchair, no cane. I had done it. I had walked out of that facility on my own 2 feet. The doctors called it a miracle. I called it justice. As I took my first steps toward a new life, I allowed myself one final thought about Sarah. She never saw me coming, but I always saw her. I should have known it wasn't over. Sarah was in prison. I was free. I had won. But people like her, they don't just lose. They wait. They plot. And they strike when you least expect it. 6 months later, I had rebuilt my life. New apartment, new job, new me. My body wasn't what it used to be, but I was walking. I was living. For the first time in years, I felt like a man again. Not a prisoner, not a victim. I should have been happy. But then, the letters started. The first letter, it arrived without a return address, just my name in neat, familiar handwriting, Sarah's handwriting. Miss me, darling? I nearly crushed the paper in my fist. I didn't reply, but the letters kept coming, every week, every single one filled with knowing words, taunts, little games. Prison is so lonely, but don't worry. I have friends. You'd be surprised who owes me favors. You didn't really think I'd stay locked away forever, did you? Sleep well, darling. I know where you live. That one got to me because she shouldn't have known. I had moved. I had changed everything. So how? Who was helping her? The breaking point, one night I came home late. Rain poured down in sheets. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, bones aching. From rehab, ready to collapse into bed, and then I froze. The door was open, just a crack. I knew I had locked it. I stepped inside slowly, every nerve in my body on fire. The apartment was dark, silent, but not empty. Something was wrong. I reached for the nearest object, a heavy lamp, my grip tightening. My fingers weren't as strong as they used to be, but they were strong enough to fight. Then, a whisper. Right, behind me. You're getting sloppy, darling. I spun around, swinging the lamp, but I hit nothing. The whisper had been in my head. I turned on the lights. My apartment looked untouched. No footprints. No sign of forced entry. Just one thing was different. On my kitchen table, sitting right in the center, was an envelope. I walked over, heart pounding, opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid, a picture of me, sleeping, in this apartment. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. She had been here, or worse. She had someone on the outside, someone who could get to me anytime they wanted. I clenched. The photo in my fist, breath shaking. No more running. It was time to end this. For good. The next move. I spent the next 2 weeks planning, watching, waiting. I needed to know who was helping her. And then I found him, a lawyer. His name was Eric Bell, and he was one of those slimy backroom dealing types, the kind that could twist the law until it screamed. He had been visiting Sarah in prison. A lot. I followed him one night, keeping my distance. He stopped at a rundown bar drinking alone. I walked up behind him, my hands steady. "Tell me what, you know?" He turned, startled. Then he saw my face and smirked. "Well, well, the dead man walks." I grabbed his wrist and twisted, hard. He yelped, nearly spilling his drink. "Sarah is writing me. Someone's been in my apartment. You're going to tell me everything. Now." He laughed, rubbing his wrist. "Or what? You'll break me? Please. You're barely holding yourself together." I leaned in close. "I've already taken down one murderer, Belle. You want to be the second?" His smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw fear. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he muttered, then enlightened me. Belle sighed, taking a slow sip of his drink. Before setting it down, then he leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Sarah's getting out." The words sent ice through my veins. "That's impossible." "Is it?" he mused. "She's got dirt on people, Langston. Real people. People with power. You think she just sat in a cell for 6 months twiddling her thumbs? No, she's been planning. She knew you'd testify. She knew you'd walk free. But now, she's playing the long game. And guess what?" He grinned. "She's winning." My hands clenched into fists. "Not for long." Belle chuckled. "You keep telling yourself that." I stood up. "Tell her I'm coming." I walked out, feeling stronger than ever. If Sarah wanted a game, she was about to learn that I played to win. Sarah was getting out. The woman who had betrayed me, framed me for murder, and nearly destroyed my life was about to walk free. I wasn't going to let that happen. The Plan Bell thought he had rattled me. He thought I'd run, disappear, be afraid. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I had spent months learning how to fight again, not just physically, but mentally. Sarah thought she was the only one who could play the long game. She was wrong. If she was coming for me, I was going to be ready, and this time, I wasn't going to let her get back up. 2 weeks later, the prison release. The day Sarah walked out of Black Ridge Women's Correctional Facility, a storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled in the distance as if the sky itself was warning the world. She stepped out in a sleek black dress, nothing like the orange jumpsuit I had last seen her in. Her hair was perfect. Her smile, even more so. She looked like a woman who had already won. A black car waited at the curb. She slid inside without hesitation. I followed at a distance. Sarah didn't go home. She went to a private estate, one I recognized. It belonged to Daniel Harlow, a powerful businessman, a man known for making problems disappear. I clenched my jaw. So, this was it. Sarah wasn't just getting out. She was rebuilding her empire. I needed to stop her before she got too strong. Breaking in Harlow's estate was massive. Security was tight. Cameras, guards, high fences. But I had one advantage. Everyone thought I was still the helpless, broken man in a wheelchair. I wasn't. I waited until nightfall, moving through the trees, using the cover of darkness. The old me would have never done this. But the old me had been too trusting. That man was dead. I slipped through the perimeter, avoiding the cameras, reached the back of the house, climbed up to the second-floor balcony. Sarah's voice drifted through the open window. I froze. The conversation. "He's watching me, Daniel." Sarah's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something cold. "Let him," Harlow replied. "He's nothing." Sarah laughed softly. "You don't understand. He's different now. Smarter. Stronger." A pause. "Are you afraid of him?" Harlow asked. Silence. Then, finally. "No, but I respect him now." I grinned. She should. Harlow sighed. "What do you want me to do?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Make him disappear." The trap eye had heard enough. I slipped back into the shadows and made my way out, heart pounding but mind sharp. Sarah wanted me gone. Good. Because that meant she wasn't ready for what was coming. She thought I'd go into hiding. She thought I'd run, but I wasn't running. I was hunting, and the next time she saw me would be the last. Sarah wanted me dead. Good. That meant she was finally afraid, but I wasn't going to let her come for me on her terms. No. This time I was setting the trap. 1 week later, the invitation, if Sarah wanted a war, I was going to bring her to the battlefield of my choosing. I sent her a message, simple, direct, a handwritten letter, just like the ones she had been sending me. Sarah, let's end this. Face to face. The old house, midnight. Come alone. Langston, the old house was our former home, the place where I had once been a husband, where I had once been helpless, but I wasn't that man anymore. Now, that house was a battleground, the setup I spent days preparing. Every door, every window, every possible escape route. I set up cameras, hidden microphones, everything I'd need to capture the truth. Sarah wasn't going to slither away from this. 1. Then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., I sat in the old study, waiting, and at midnight she arrived. The confrontation, Sarah stepped into the house like a ghost from my past. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor. She was wearing black, like she was mourning something. Maybe she was. "You look good, darling," she said, stopping just a few feet from me. "Standing on your own 2 feet now." I didn't answer. I just watched her. Sarah smiled, tilting her head. "No welcome home kiss?" I finally spoke. "You don't belong here," she smirked. "Oh, but I do. This is still my house, isn't it?" I leaned back. "Not anymore. You lost everything." Sarah's eyes darkened. "Did I?" She reached into her coat pocket, slowly, deliberately. I tensed, ready, but instead of a weapon, she pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table. "You think you've won," she said, "but I have something you don't." I frowned. "And what's that?" She leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Insurance." "The secret." I picked up the flash drive, turning it over in my hand. "What's on it?" Sarah's smile was ice cold. The truth. I hesitated. Sarah was many things, but she was never careless. If she brought this, it meant she wanted me to see something. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A video popped up. Hit play, and what I saw changed everything. The footage, it wasn't Sarah, it wasn't Carter, it was me. The night Carter died, but it wasn't the version I remembered. The footage showed Carter standing in my room, whispering something to Sarah. She looked scared, hesitant. Then I moved, not just a twitch, not just a finger. I stood up, and then I took the gun from Sarah's hands and shot Carter myself. The blood sprayed across the wall. Sarah staggered back, horrified. And then I sat back down, limp, as if I had never moved at all. I felt my blood go ice cold. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Sarah just watched me, waiting, studying, smiling. "You were never as paralyzed as you thought, darling," she murmured. "Your mind locked it away, blocked it out, but your body remembered." I shook my head. "No, But the video didn't lie. I had killed Carter. Me, not Sarah. Not entirely. And suddenly I realized she had never been afraid of me. She had been waiting for me to remember. And now that I had? Sarah leaned forward, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Who do you think the police will believe, Langston?" She smiled. "The woman they already locked away?" Her eyes gleamed. "Or the man who just realized he's been a killer all along?" I couldn't breathe. The screen burned in front of me. The footage, the impossible footage, kept playing on a loop. Me killing Carter, not Sarah, not anyone else. Me! I staggered back, nearly knocking over the chair. My mind raced, grasping for an answer, any answer, that made sense. Sarah just sat there, calm as ever, watching me crumble. "The mind is a fragile thing, darling," she purred. "It locks away what it can't handle. But now you know the truth." I shook my head. No, this is fake. It has to be." "Oh, Langston," she sighed, almost disappointed. "I knew you'd say that. That's why there's more." She reached across the table, hit play on another file, and then I heard it. The confession. My own voice. I had to do it. My stomach twisted. The recording kept going. He was going to hurt her. I saw it in his eyes. I didn't have a choice. Sarah watched me, her expression unreadable. I was hearing myself confess, but I had no memory of saying those words. And that's when it hit me. Sarah had never needed to kill Carter because I had done it for her. And now? Now she had everything she needed to destroy me. Checkmate? Sarah leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. "So now you understand," she said softly. "I never needed to frame you. I only needed you to forget." I clenched my fists. "Why show me this now?" Her smile was slow, calculated. "Because, darling, now I don't have to run anymore. And neither do you." "You expect me to just let you walk away?" "No," she admitted. "I expect you to realize something very important." She stood up, graceful as ever. "You and we're not so different." She walked to the door, then paused, turned. "You wanted Carter dead just as much as I did." She tapped the side of her head. "The only difference is, you forgot." Then she was gone, and I was left standing there, my whole world turned upside down. The realization, I sat there for hours, staring at the screen. I tried to remember, tried to force the memory back. But it was like looking into an empty room. The door was open, but there was nothing inside. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, a small voice whispered, "She's right. I wanted Carter dead. Maybe, just maybe, I had always known." The decision Sarah thought she had won. She thought she had. Checkmate. But what she didn't realize, I wasn't playing her game anymore. She wanted me to believe we were the same. But I wasn't like her. Not yet. But if I was going to take her down, maybe I needed to be for one last move. Sarah thought she had me, that I'd crumble, that I'd run, that I'd let the truth swallow me whole. But she underestimated one thing. I was done being her puppet. If I had killed Carter, if my mind had buried it, then fine. I'd accept that. But Sarah, she wasn't going to walk away from this. Not this time. 1 week later, the hunter becomes the hunted. Sarah had gone back to her old life. New penthouse. New designer clothes. New allies. She was back in the game, rebuilding her power. But I was watching, waiting. And then, I moved. The setup, I needed proof. Real proof. Not just that she had manipulated me, but that she had orchestrated everything. The money laundering, the backroom deals, the people who had disappeared because they got in her way. I needed to expose all of it. And for that, I needed someone on the inside. Enter Eric Bell. Leverage Bell had been Sarah's lawyer, her fixer, but he was also weak. I found him in a bar, same one as before. This time, when I sat next to him, he didn't smirk. He just sighed. "You again." I slid a flash drive across the table. "You're going to help me bring her down." Bell snorted. "Why the hell would I do that?" I leaned in, whispered. "Because if you don't, this goes to the cops. Every deal you helped her pull off, every name, every bribe. And trust me, Belle, prison won't be as kind to you as it was to her." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The deal bell cracked, faster than I expected. Within 3 days, I had enough dirt on Sarah to end her. The offshore accounts, the false identities. The real reason Carter had to die, he had found out she was skimming from Harlow's empire. And now? Now I just needed to deliver the final blow. The final meeting. I sent Sarah one last letter. Meet me. One last time. The rooftop. Midnight. Come alone. And she did. I waited under the city lights, the wind whipping around us. Sarah stepped onto the rooftop, her expression unreadable. You really do love the dramatics, she said. I pulled out the flash drive, held it up. This ends tonight, Sarah. She tilted her head, amused. Does it? She took a step closer, eyes gleaming. What happens if I push you off this rooftop, darling? I smiled. Then the cops get an email. Everything, every crime, every secret. Your entire empire burns. Her expression didn't change. She just studied me. And then she laughed, a slow, quiet laugh. You finally learned how to play. She took another step, closer. So what now? I held up my phone. Now? You make a choice. I pressed send. Somewhere in the city, sirens began to wail. Sarah's smile finally faltered. I didn't come here to kill you, Sarah. I came here to watch you lose. And for the first time since this all began, she did. Epilogue. Sarah was arrested that night. This time she wasn't walking free. Belle cut a deal, testifying against her. Harlow turned on her too. Everyone abandoned her the moment she lost her power, and me? I walked away, finally free. But as I watched the news the next day, Sarah being led away in cuffs, her cold, knowing eyes meeting the camera, I wondered. Had I really won? Or had Sarah just taught me to be exactly like her? I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Sarah was behind bars. Belle had flipped. Harlow had thrown her to the wolves. I had won, or so I thought. Then, 1 week later, I got a letter, handwritten, elegant, from Sarah. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, my blood ran cold. The letter. Darling, did you really think this was over? I must admit I'm impressed. You played the game well, but you forgot one thing. I never lose. You should check the news. See you soon. S.I. stared. At the words, heart-pounding. Then I grabbed my phone, opened the news, and there it was. Sarah Blackwood, prison transport attacked, presumed dead, dead. No, not dead, gone, the escape. The report was vague. A prison transfer gone wrong. The convoy had been hit on a remote road outside the city. Bodies were found. Burned beyond recognition. Sarah was listed as one of the victims, but I knew better. Sarah Blackwood didn't die in some roadside attack. She orchestrated it. She was out there, somewhere, and she wanted me to know it. The paranoia. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow outside my window felt like her. Every passing car made me flinch. I checked my locks, my cameras, but deep down, I knew it didn't matter. If Sarah wanted me dead, she'd come for me when I least expected it. The final game. Begins, I sat in the dark, gripping the letter. I had spent months hunting Sarah, taking her down. But now I was the one, being hunted, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I could win. Sarah was alive, and she was coming for me. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a game only one of us would survive. The first move. I had spent months hunting Sarah. Now, I was the prey. I changed hotels, wiped my digital footprint, got a burner phone, but deep down I knew it wasn't enough. Sarah had planned her own escape down to the second. She was always 5 steps ahead, and the fact that she sent me a letter meant she wasn't hiding. She wanted me to know she was coming, which meant she was toying with me, and that pissed me off. The message at 3 a.m., my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number, one message, a photo of me. taken from across the street. She was close, too close. Then another message. You're making this too easy, darling. I gritted my teeth. Enough. I wasn't waiting to die. I was ending this. Tonight. The trap Sarah was a shadow, a ghost. But she had one weakness. Her ego. She wanted me scared, wanted me to run, so I did the opposite. I sent her a message. Meet me. Midnight. The old penthouse. No tricks. No running. Just you and me. I waited. Watching. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then delivered. And then read. She was coming. Midnight. The final confrontation. I stood in the penthouse, the city glowing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. I wasn't alone. A gun sat on the table, a recorder hidden in my pocket, and, behind me, a backup plan. Then the elevator dinged, and there she was. Sarah Blackwood, alive. Smiling. Miss me? The last conversation. Sarah strolled in like she owned the place. Black dress, gloves, red lipstick. No fear. She circled me, eyes gleaming. I have to admit, Langston, I thought you'd run, but here you are. I clenched my fists. You don't scare me anymore. She smirked. You should be scared. I glanced at the gun. She followed my eyes. Go ahead, she whispered. Shoot me. I didn't move, because we both knew the truth. I wasn't a killer. Not like her. Sarah stepped closer. I could smell her perfume, the same one she wore the night. Carter died. You think you won, she murmured. But tell me, are you sleeping at night? Do you check over your shoulder? Does your heart race when the phone rings? I stayed silent. She tilted her head. You may have locked me up, darling, but in the end, I still got what I wanted. And what's that? I asked. She smiled. I live in your head now, rent-free, the choice. The gun was right there, one pull of the trigger. One bullet, and Sarah Blackwood would be gone forever, or I could do something worse. I smiled back. You're wrong, Sarah. Her eyes flickered. Am I? I pulled out my phone, hit play, and her own voice filled the room. I planned everything, the escape, the attack. You really thought I was dead? Sarah froze, her own confession, recorded, live-streamed to the police. Her smile faltered. You son of a... The door burst open. FBI, SWAT, guns drawn. Sarah whipped around, her hands instinctively reaching for a hidden blade. Don't move! I watched as they tackled her, pinned her down, cuffed her. And this time, there was no escape, no tricks. No letters. Sarah Blackwood was done, and me, for the first time in years, I was finally free. Epilogue. 1 month later, Sarah was sentenced to life without parole. No deals, no second chances. I stood outside the courthouse, breathing in the cold night air. No more games, no more ghosts. Just me, walking away, for good. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because as I got into my car, my phone buzzed. Unknown. Number 1. Message. A photo of me taken from across the street, and underneath it, 3 words. Miss me yet? I stared at my phone. The photo. The message. Miss me yet? My heart pounded. Sarah was locked away. Maximum security. No contact with the outside world. So how the hell did I just get a message from her? A ghost in the machine. I scanned the street outside my car. Nothing. No one. I checked the number. Untraceable. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing, and they wanted me to feel it. That creeping, suffocating paranoia. Sarah had spent years inside. My head. Even locked away, she was still playing her game, and I wasn't sure I could win. The first clue, I needed answers. I drove straight to the prison. It was nearly midnight, but I didn't care. I flashed my credentials, pulled every favor I had left, and within minutes, I was standing outside Sarah's cell. And there she was, sitting on a metal cot, reading a book, completely calm, like she was expecting me. She looked up, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then that smirk. "Darling, couldn't stay away?" The conversation. I stepped closer. "Who sent the message, Sarah?" She blinked. "What message?" I held up my phone, let her see the photo, the words. She glanced at it, then laughed. "Oh, Langston, you really think I need a phone to haunt you?" I gritted my teeth. "Answer me!" She leaned back, eyes gleaming. "You took everything from me, my freedom, my empire. And yet," she tilted her head, "here you are, obsessing over me, chasing ghosts." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Who sent the message?" For the first time, her smirk faded, and then softly, "I don't know." The second player. I left the prison more unsettled than when I arrived. Sarah wasn't lying, which meant someone else was playing the game now, someone with power, resources, and they were watching me. But who? The message. Part 2. My phone buzzed. Again. Another message. This time, it was an address, a warehouse on the outskirts of town, and underneath it, 2 words. "Come alone." I tightened my grip on the wheel. I had a choice: ignore it and live in fear, or go and face whoever was pulling the strings. I put the car in gear. Time to end this. The address burned on my screen, a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Midnight. Come alone. A trap? Definitely. A setup? Without a doubt. But whoever sent the message knew me, knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. And so, like a moth drawn to the flame, I went. The warehouse. The place was abandoned, no lights, no movement, just the hum of the wind rattling against rusted metal. I stepped inside, gun drawn. Shadows stretched across the walls. Then, a single hanging light bulb flickered on. And beneath it, a man, sitting in a chair, legs crossed, arms resting on the armrests, like a king on a throne. He looked up, smiled. "Took you long enough, Langston?" The stranger, I didn't recognize him. Mid-40s, sharp suit, silver cufflinks, a man used to power. I tightened my grip on the gun. "Who the hell are you?" He chuckled. "You don't know me, but I know you." I took a step closer. "You sent the messages." He nodded. "Guilty." I aimed the gun at his chest. "Why?" The man leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Because you and I have a problem." His expression darkened. "Sarah Blackwood, the real threat," I frowned. "Sarah's in prison," he shook his head. "And yet here you are, following her ghost." I said nothing. The man sighed. "Tell me, Langston, did you really think Sarah's empire would just vanish?" I didn't answer. He smiled coldly. "Sarah wasn't just some con artist. She was a queen. And a queen has subjects, followers, people willing to do anything for her." My stomach twisted. "You're saying she still has people on the outside?" His eyes gleamed. "I'm saying she never lost control." The offer, I lowered the gun. "Why are you telling me this?" He leaned back. "Because you and I want the same thing." I scoffed. "And what's that?" His smile vanished. "To make sure Sarah Blackwood stays buried." Silence. Then he slid a file across the table. Thick, heavy. Inside, photos, documents, a web of names and faces, a network. Sarah's network. People in politics, law enforcement, business, a secret army. And they were still loyal to her. The man tapped the folder. "This is just the beginning. Sarah's planning something big," I exhaled. "And you want me to stop her?" He nodded. "Before it's too late." I closed the file, looked him in the eye. "And if I say no?" He chuckled. Then you'll be dead before the week is over. The decision I left the warehouse with the file in my hands and a pit in my stomach. Sarah was still pulling strings, even from inside a prison cell. And now, I had a choice. Walk away and spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, or dive back in. Face Sarah one last time and end this for good. I looked at my phone, opened my contacts, hovered over one name, then I hit call. We need to talk. Sarah's empire wasn't dead. It had just gone underground. And now, I had a choice. Run or fight. I chose to fight. The meeting, the call I made was to Detective Harlow. I met him at a rundown diner on the east side of the city. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and everybody had secrets. He slid into the booth across from me, looking exhausted. I thought we were done with this, he muttered. I pushed the file toward him. So did I. Harlow flipped it open. His face paled. Jesus, where the hell did you get this? I hesitated. A source. He arched an eyebrow. Anonymous? Something like that. He exhaled. This means Sarah still has pull. These people, judges, cops, businessmen, half of them are untouchable. I leaned in. Not if we burn it all down. His eyes flickered to mine, and just like that, we were back in the game. The first target Sarah's web had a weak link. A man named Victor Dane, mid-level financier, helped launder Sarah's money. More importantly, he was scared, and scared men, they break. I found him at a country club, sipping a $200 glass of bourbon like his world wasn't crumbling. I slid into the seat across from him. He flinched. What the... Relax, Victor, I said, pouring myself a drink. We need to talk. His hands shook. I don't know anything. I placed my phone on the table. Pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the air. Victor, darling, if anything happens to me, you know what to do. His face went white. Gotcha. The betrayal Victor cracked in minutes, told me everything. Sarah had been planning something before she got arrested, a contingency plan. Something big, something called Project Revenant. I didn't like the sound of that. But before I could press for more, Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face contorted in fear. No, 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 no. I frowned. What? Then his phone buzzed again. This time mine buzzed too. Unknown number, one message. Nice try, Langston. Before I could react, boom! The window exploded. Glass, screams, chaos. I hit the ground, ears ringing. Victor! Dead. A bullet. Clean through his head. And me? I was next. The chase. I bolted out the back door, shoving through the chaos. The shooter was... close. Too close. I sprinted through the alley, ducking behind dumpsters. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then, footsteps. Fast. Steady. Someone was hunting me. I pulled my gun, pressed against the brick wall, waited. Then, a shadow. A figure stepped into the alley, and when I saw the face, my blood went cold, because it wasn't a hitman, wasn't a stranger. It was Bell, the return of the ghost Sarah's right-hand man, the one who betrayed her, the one who flipped, and yet, here he was, alive, armed, smirking. I aimed my gun. You were supposed to be dead. Bell cocked his head. So were you. I tightened my grip. You're working for her again? He laughed. Langston, you still don't get it, do you? I said nothing. Bell stepped closer. This isn't just Sarah's game anymore. You're in the middle of something bigger, something you can't stop. My jaw clenched. Project Revenant. Bell's smile widened. You're catching on. The tension crackled between us. Then, His eyes flicked behind me. I knew that look. A distraction. I spun. Too late. Sharp crack against my skull. Then, darkness. The awakening. I came to hours later. My hands were tied. The room was dark. The smell of damp concrete filled my nose. And standing in front of me, Sarah Blackwood, smiling. "Did you miss me, darling?" Sarah Blackwood, alive, free, smiling. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, seeing her here or realizing just how badly I had underestimated her. I was tied to a chair, my wrists bound behind me. A single light bulb flickered overhead. The room smelled of damp concrete and dust. Sarah crouched in front of me, resting her chin on her hand, like we were old lovers catching up. "You look terrible, Langston," I exhaled slowly. "I could say the same, but I think prison did wonders for your complexion." She chuckled. "Still sharp. Good. I was worried you might have gone soft." I tested the restraints. Tight. No easy way out. "So," I said, keeping my voice even, "either I got knocked out and dumped into some hole in the ground, or you just staged the most impressive prison break of the century." Sarah's smirk widened. "Oh, darling, I never broke out." I frowned. "Then how the hell are you here?" She leaned in, her perfume filling the air. "I walked out the front door." The conspiracy runs deeper. The words hung in the air. I narrowed my eyes. "That's impossible." She tilted her head. "Is it? You've seen the file. You know who my friends are. Judges, cops, politicians. You really think a little thing like maximum security was going to keep me locked up?" I clenched my jaw. The file, the web of names, the secret army she had waiting on the outside. She hadn't lost power. She'd just been waiting. Sarah stood and stretched. "The real question, Langston, is, why are you still trying to fight me? You had your victory. You put me away. And yet here you are, chasing shadows, trying to stop something you don't even understand." I forced a smirk. "Call it a bad habit." Her eyes gleamed. "More like an obsession. Project Revenant, I needed information now." I leaned back in the chair. "So tell me, Project Revenant, what is it?" She sighed, almost disappointed. "Always business with you." Then she walked behind me. I tensed as her fingers ghosted over my shoulders. "Revenant means one who returns from the dead, Langston. You of all people should appreciate that." I swallowed. "Sounds dramatic," she chuckled. "Oh, it is." Then she crouched beside me, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just a plan, Langston. It's a resurrection." I frowned. "Of what?" Her smile widened. "Everything you thought you destroyed. The escape plan, I didn't have time for games. I needed a way out, now." I glanced around. The room was bare except for a metal table and a single guard standing by the door, armed. Sarah was too smart to leave me completely alone, but she wasn't watching my hands. She didn't see the razor blade I had stolen from Victor Dane's pocket before he died. Slowly, I worked the blade against the ropes. Sarah kept talking, oblivious. "You were always the smartest man in the room, Langston, but this time, you're 3 steps behind. Project Revenant is already in motion and, you can't stop it." I met her gaze, smirked. "That's funny." Snap, the rope fell from my wrists. Because I just got started. I moved fast. Before the guard could react, I lunged forward, grabbing his wrist and twisting the gun from his grip. Sarah stepped back. Shock flickered across her face, just for a moment. Then she laughed. "God, I love this game." I aimed the gun at her. "It's over, Sarah." Her eyes gleamed. "Oh, darling, it's only just begun." Then the lights cut out. The room plunged into darkness, a whisper against my ear. "Run fast, Langston. You're not ready for what's coming." Ethan Cole was dead, tortured, left in the river like garbage, and carved into his skin, Project Revenant. I didn't believe in coincidences. Sarah had killed him, or at the very least ordered the kill, which meant Ethan had known something worth dying for, and I was going to find out what. The dead man's trail eye parked 2 blocks away from Ethan's apartment. Too risky to go in through the front. Cops would be crawling all over it soon. So I went in the way nobody ever checks. The fire escape. The metal groaned under my weight as I climbed up 3 stories, boots silent against the rust. When I reached his window, I pulled my lockpicks from my coat and got to work. Click, click. The window slid open. I slipped inside. Ethan's apartment was a wreck. Drawers pulled out. Papers scattered. The TV was smashed. Someone had been here first, and they hadn't been searching. They had been destroying. The hidden file. I moved quickly, scanning the room. Whoever ransacked the place had been looking for something specific, and I had a hunch they hadn't found it, because Ethan Cole wasn't sloppy. If he knew Sarah was still pulling the strings, he would have hidden his insurance policy. I checked the walls, floorboards, the fridge, nothing. Then my eyes landed on his bookshelf. Dozens of old novels stacked neatly, too neatly. I ran my fingers across the spines until I felt it. One book was fake, a hollowed-out compartment. I pulled it free and flipped it open. Inside, a USB drive. Bingo. The hunter becomes the hunted. I pocketed the drive and turned. Too late. The door burst open. A figure stepped inside. Black tactical gear. Silencer on the pistol. A professional. We locked eyes. Then, he fired. I dove behind the couch. Thwip. Thwip. Silenced bullets punched through the cushions, missing me by inches. I drew my own gun, but before I could fire, smoke. A grenade clattered. Onto the floor. My vision blurred. Tear gas. I coughed, stumbled. Footsteps rushed toward me. A fist slammed into my gut. Another cracked against my jaw. I hit the ground, dizzy. Then, a voice. Low. Cold. Familiar. You should have walked away, Langston. Through the haze, I saw the shooter step forward. His face came into view, and my blood ran cold because I knew him. It was Bell. The return of the ghost. I gasped for air, blinking through the tear gas. Bell crouched beside me, smirking. "I warned you," he said. "You're in over your head." I spat blood. "What the hell is Project Revenant?" Bell tilted his head. "You're about to find out." Then, darkness. A needle jabbed into my neck. I fought it, but my vision blurred, my limbs went heavy, and the last thing I saw, Bell's smirk. "Sweet dreams, Langston." Pain. That was the first thing I felt when I woke up. A dull, throbbing ache in the back of my skull, like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Then the second thing, I couldn't move. My wrists were bound, my ankles too. Metal cuffs. Tight. The air was cold, sterile. A single fluorescent light buzzed above me. A lab? A warehouse? A basement? Not good. Then a voice. "Welcome back, Langston." I turned my head, and there he was. Bell, smirking, arms crossed, dressed in all black, like a man who didn't need to hide the fact that he worked in the dark. Behind him, a window. Not just any window. A one-way mirror. Someone was watching. Someone worse than Bell. Project Revenant revealed. I exhaled slowly. "So this is the part where you monologue?" Bell chuckled. "Something like that. You want to know what Project Revenant is, right?" I glared. "Ethan Cole died for it. I figured it had to be something big." Bell leaned forward. "Bigger than you think." Then he pulled a tablet from his coat and tapped the screen. A file appeared. A name. My name. Langston Reed. Subject 02. My blood ran. Cold. "What the hell is this?" Bell grinned. Project Revenant isn't just a conspiracy, Langston. He swiped the screen. More names, dozens, all marked deceased, until he reached one. Subject 001, the picture loaded, and I stopped breathing. Because I knew that face. I had buried that face. It was Victor Dane, alive. The dead don't stay. Dead. Forced my voice to stay steady. Victor Dane is dead. Bell raised an eyebrow. Is he? He swiped again. A grainy security feed appeared. Victor Dane, walking, talking, breathing, 2 years after I watched him die. I clenched my fists. How? Bell leaned in. What if I told you death isn't the end anymore? I stayed silent. Bell continued. Project Revenant is about control, power, the ability to bring back select individuals and ensure their loyalty. My stomach turned. You're playing God, Bell smirked. No, we're just taking back what's ours. I knew that tone. This wasn't just about science. This was about war, and I was in the middle of it. The offer bell tapped. The tablet again, locking the screen. Here's the deal, Langston. He stood, hands in his pockets, casual, dangerous. You're smart, resourceful, and frankly, you're a pain in the ass. But that's exactly why you're valuable. I narrowed my eyes. What are you saying? Bell smiled. I'm saying you don't have to be our enemy. He crouched beside me, lowering his voice. Join us, Langston. Work with us. We bring people back. Fix mistakes. Rewrite history. Think of the possibilities. I held his gaze. And if I say no? Bell shrugged. Then you disappear, permanently. No body, no traces, just gone. A slow grin spread across his face. But you won't say no, because deep down you want to know if it's true. You want to know if Victor Dane is really alive. And more importantly, he leaned in. You want to know if we can bring back someone else. My blood turned to ice. Sarah. Bell's smile widened. That's right. You buried her once. But what if we unburied her? What if she's part of this? I swallowed hard. This was a game I wasn't ready for, but I had no choice. The decision bell stood up. I'll give you some time to think about it. He nodded to the two-way mirror, the door unlocked, and then he left. I was alone. Heart racing, mind spinning, Project Revenant. A conspiracy that didn't just control people, it brought them back. Sarah. Dane. Who else? I took a slow breath. Bell thought he had me cornered. He thought I had only 2 choices, join or die. But he forgot something. There's always a third option, and I was going to find it. The door closed behind Bell with a click. The faint hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound left in the room. The silence was deafening. I took a slow, steady breath, fighting the wave of panic that threatened to take over. Project Revenant. The power to bring people back from the dead, to rewrite history, to shape the future. And at the heart of it all, Sarah, Victor Dane, and now, me. But there was one thing Bell hadn't considered. I wasn't alone. There was someone on the outside, someone who had been watching me for months. Harlow. The boy, detective. My only ally left in this mess. He wasn't just a cop. He had resources, contacts, and he knew what I had gotten myself into. If I could get a message to him, the escape plan I wasn't bound in a traditional cell. There were no bars, no locked doors. It was more of a holding room, a place to keep me in check while they figured out what to do with me. I needed to act fast before they decided I was no longer useful. The metal cuffs on my wrists were tight, but I'd been in worse situations. I could get out of these, I just needed a little time. I glanced around the room, no windows, nothing to work with except the walls and the floor, but there was a small, almost invisible camera above the door. I could feel its gaze. It was watching me. I had to be careful. No sudden movements. I couldn't give them a reason to kill me just yet. The breakout. I waited for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was only minutes. Long enough for Belle to think I was broken, long enough for the guards outside to get complacent. Then, I did. What I always do, I bided my time. The key to any good escape is patience. You wait for the right moment, the one where your enemy lets their guard down, and when that moment comes, you strike. I focused on the cuffs, slipping a small metal tool from my boot. I'd been planning this since I was dragged in here. A quick twist, the metal snapped. I was free. I kept my movements smooth and deliberate, ensuring no sound echoed through the room. One guard, two, both of them were outside, talking. Now was my chance. I slid toward the door, moving like a shadow, my breath shallow. I reached the door handle and paused. I could hear footsteps approaching. Without thinking, I kicked the door, open with everything I had, sending it crashing into the first guard. He staggered back, stunned. I was out in a flash, moving like a ghost down the hall. Harlow's warning. I made my way down the corridor, careful to stay out of sight. The building was more like a bunker. Faded metal walls, cold, sterile rooms. I couldn't afford to make any noise. I found a stairwell and took it two at a time, making my way to the ground floor. My phone was in my pocket, but I wasn't ready to call Harlow just yet. I needed to be sure I wasn't being followed. I glanced over my shoulder. No one. I pulled my phone out and dialed his number. Ring. Ring. Langston. I didn't have time for pleasantries. Get to the warehouse, Harlow. Project. Revenant is real. They're bringing people back from the dead. I could hear him breathe. What are you talking about? Who's behind this? I checked the hallway. Belle, Sarah, Victor Dane. The whole damn thing. They're all connected. You need to get in touch with someone on the inside. Someone high up. This is bigger than we thought. Harlow's voice dropped lower, more urgent. Langston, listen to me. They know you're on the move. They know everything. My heart dropped. What? I got a tip from a source inside. They've been tracking you, watching every move. My stomach twisted. Then why are we still talking? Harlow hesitated. Because I need you to stay alive. I can't do anything if you're dead. But if you can get to me, we'll stop this together. I wanted to believe him, but I had no way of knowing if he was still on my side. The revelation, just as I was about to respond, a loud bang echoed through the hallway. Langston! I didn't turn around. I ran. Footsteps. Too many. They were coming. I was surrounded. The door at the end of the hall opened and two men stepped out. Black suits, guns drawn. They weren't here to negotiate. I dove to the side, rolling, behind a stack of crates. The shots rang out. I squeezed off a few rounds, but they were too far away. The men moved forward, surrounding me from all sides. The decision. I had no choice. I ducked into the shadows, holding my breath. The seconds ticked by in what felt like hours. I had one chance. I wasn't about to be caught again. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a steel pipe, and swung it with everything I had. The force of the impact sent one of the men to the ground. I didn't stop to see if he was breathing. The second man was quicker. He lunged at me, but I was already moving. I ducked and twisted, his arm sending him crashing into a wall. Then I ran.